So my name is John Powers. First of all, thanks so much for coming tonight. Quick, raise your hand if you work in policy. All right, raise your hand if you work in finance. Oh, there's some finance folks here. Good. And raise your hand if you're other. All right, good. The reason I ask, so I actually have a policy background. I started off as President Obama's first special advisor on energy to the Army, and in that role stood up a large-scale renewable energy office for the Army where we're doing these third-party contracts called power purchase agreements. And there was a guy working at the Department of Energy. He's a former Goldman Sachs guy, sort of now the Green Czar of New York, named Richard Kaufman. He'd come across the river to the Pentagon and sit down with us and tell us he wanted to securitize our power purchase agreements. And no one knew what he was talking about, including myself. And so I went out and bought Corporate Finance for Dummies, and that was my MBA. This is true story. And then I went to the White House and became the Chief Sustainability Officer for the federal government. So I did a similar effort across the entire federal footprint. And with the same, I'd go to the same meetings with Richard. Now I began to understand what he was talking about, but saw many people on our side of the table, even at the White House, not know the financing side of this. So I thought there was something here. And I started to dive in. He and I set up a clean energy finance working group, saw a lot of inefficiencies in the clean energy finance space. And what do I mean by that? Today, in a normal solar project, the price of panels have come down significantly. The installation has come down significantly. 64% of that project are what's known as soft costs, right? So finance costs, integration to the grid, but costs that should be addressed, and the finance is a heavy part of that. And I'll come back to that in a second. So I transitioned out of the government and met a partner of mine who was a brother-in-law of a guy I served in Iraq with. And he said, hey, I think I got a way to crack the code here. And so we launched CleanCapital with that idea, and I'll talk about that more in a second. But if you look at the evolution of clean energy finance or solar finance, it starts off with a company in New Jersey wants to put solar panels in their roof. One, do these solar panels work? This is 2008. Two, is there enough sun in New Jersey to even do this? Three, you want to do something called a power purchase agreement. We've never heard of this before. What does this mean, right? But over time, when the right policies came into place, tax equity began to move into the market. Major corporations like Walmart, Apple, eBay took major bets on this and started to do a lot of long-term power purchase agreements. And the price of panels came down. Panels began to prove themselves out over time. But the early capital in those deals was very expensive capital, like private equity capital, which is not cheap. But as it matured, more and more players began to think about and get in the space, right? We're still at a point today, though, where less than 0.5% of institutional capital worldwide is in clean energy, right? So what does that mean? That means the cost of capital in these projects continue to be high. The deals themselves are inefficient, and we need to address it. So at CleanCapital, there's others trying to do what we do, but at CleanCapital, our goal is to bring efficiency to that market. So we look at solar projects, and we actually started looking at operating solar projects. So solar projects that may have been built in 2009, 2010 that have a long-term power purchase agreements. But begins to start to look a lot like a real estate transaction, right? So we come in at year 6, for instance, and buy the next 15 years left on a company like Walmart paying that electricity bill. Now, what's interesting about that, we sort of joke internally, that was our gateway drug for investors. Investors who want to get into solar, they're not really sure, they want to play in the impact space, labor pension funds, endowments, and others. This is a way to do it, and it's very familiar to what you're comfortable with. And if we can get them comfortable there, we can move them earlier into the development chain. What do I mean by that? So we buy deals. If you don't know these terms, don't worry about it. Buy Corporate Finance for Dummies. Most deals have debt and equity, right? So there's actual cash and then almost like a mortgage on top of it. So early deals, though, have that tax equity slice. Now, this is a big policy play, right? Tax equity helped solar really emerge in the late part of 2008 and really hockey stick in 2010 and 11, meaning that you could take 30% off of your deal, off your construction, funded by someone who has a tax appetite that could write that off of their tax bill, right? So the simplest way to say it is, instead of me paying taxes to Uncle Sam, I'm going to put that in a solar project, and I can actually make money now off my tax money, right? It's an interesting idea, and it's been really instrumental in moving the market forward and bringing down the cost of panels and moving installation. Last year alone, solar installation was the #1 job in America. Wind technician was #2. So the market is growing, it's maturing, it's here. Now, once we move beyond those steps like tax equity, which is a really tight market and a competitive market, the better we're going to be, because the more efficient market moves, money moves. And I'll talk more about that later. But we're at a really exciting place in solar for all of the, and I obviously put my politics on my sleeve early, the lack of love you're seeing from the current administration on some of this stuff. The market is moving. When they said they're going to pull out of Paris, hundreds of companies stood up and said, we're committed to this. We're moving ahead in clean energy. CEO BlackRock just made a major announcement yesterday that said if you're not investing in sustainability or social impact, we're not going to invest in you. Like that's amazing. So the markets are moving. It's a great time to be in the industry. The finance is such a critical part of it. And even if you don't want to be in the finance side, you should begin to understand it. And there's a lot of ways to do it. We're always happy to engage, but it's such a critical part to move those projects forward. You could have the greatest technology in the world, but if you can't get it into a project and get it into the market, especially in a heavily regulated market like energy, it's not going to go anywhere. And what I'm excited about is beyond solar for storage, and wind's already there, but microgrids. This is a proven business model now, the power purchase agreements. If we can find ways to move these other technologies in there, it'll just accelerate their growth, accelerate the distribution of the grid, and I think make us a more secure country. So with that, I'll pass it back to Dave.
Thanks, John.